MacBook Pro M3 Max initial thoughts and impressions. I've lived with my new MacBook Pro M3 Max 16-inch laptop for a week now, and have been using it about the house for various things, so now is a good time to note thoughts about it, its performance and its overall value. It's lovely, but there are a couple of things I do not love, and a couple others I didn't fully expect. As a preface, last week when the M3 arrived, I explained why I had picked this particular computer, and how I mostly intended to use it. That piece is here. The following thoughts are in no particular order. 1. The MacBook Pro M3 Max comes in 14-inch and 16-inch variations. I got the 16-inch version because I mostly intend it to be a desktop replacement rather than something I carry with me when I travel, and I wanted the extra screen real estate. I knew it was going pretty large, relatively speaking. But then it arrived, and I had to admit I underestimated how large it would be. For context, here the M3 is next to my previous laptop, a 2019 edition of the Dell XPS 13. This kind of feels like a Great Dane next to a toy poodle. The screen is likely twice the size in total acreage, and the M3 weighs 4.7 pounds, 2 pounds heavier than the Dell. I can pick up the Dell with one hand with no problem. I am physically capable of picking up the M3 with one hand. But if the screen is up, I have to negotiate the leverage and stiffen up my wrist. It's unwieldy. I usually use two hands with it, because it would be exceedingly expensive to drop. 2. I got the space black version of the M3, which in addition to being the sexy new colorway that all the kids are talking about, also claims to handle fingerprints and palm smears better than some other versions of the Mac. My own anecdotal experience of this is that while a light touch will indeed not immediately transfer fingerprints, after a couple of days' use they will pile up nevertheless. I allow that I may have unusually oily fingerprints or whatever, but ultimately it's not any worse than any other dark-colored computer you might use. 3. The M3 comes with a MagSafe charger and a very chunky power block, neither of which I particularly love. Yes, the chunky power block has 140 watts, which it's capable of fast charging via the MagSafe charger. But the power block is unwieldy, especially if you're trying to plug it in where space is cramped, and the MagSafe power port is on only one side of the computer. Fortunately, the computer can also charge via the Thunderbolt/USB-C ports, of which the M3 16-inch version has 3, 2 on the left and 1 on the right. I find myself using those as often as I use the Mac 4. The screen on the M3 is extremely good and can get very bright. I haven't used the computer outside yet, because it's winter here and the weather has ranged from crappy and dangerously cold, but I don't expect there will be any problems with seeing the screen when I do. The screen resolution is not quite the 4K resolution I had on the Dell XPS 13, which, to be clear, was absolute overkill on a screen that small, but it's close enough, and the 254 pixels per inch density of the M3 means that in order to see the individual pixels I would have to get closer to the screen than my eyes can focus. It's more than fine. The color fidelity is fabulous as far as I can tell. I've already edited photos on the screen and everything looks great. 5. Other physical aspects of the M3. The keyboard is good, no better or worse than any other low-travel, mostly flat laptop keyboard I've used. It's at least as good as the keyboard on the XPS 13, and I used that with no trouble at all. My favorite laptop keyboard was and continues to be the one on the Pixelbook, which was very satisfying to use. People will tell you Apple trackpads are the best in the business, but I'm not immensely impressed with them. The one here is perfectly okay, and also large. The speakers are without qualification the best speakers I've yet heard on a laptop, with good power and response all through the range. I mean, these are laptop speakers, they're not going to you with their mighty bass response or anything. But they are rather better than merely serviceable, which is the bar with laptop speakers. Also, the M3 still sports an actual headphone jack, which is a delightful throwback in this day and age. Also an HDMI port and a place for SD cards, which is great because that's what my DSLR uses. 6. Yes, but how do programs and applications run on the thing? Exceptionally fast. Please note that I splashed out an utterly inadvisable amount of money to get the maximum RAM and SSD storage, more on that in a minute, and got the version of the M3 Max chip that includes 16 processing cores, 12 performance and 4 efficiency, and a 40-core GPU among other bells and whistles. One reason I use it as a desktop replacement is that it's actually as powerful as a fully spec'd desktop compute. 7. Let me address the $7,200 gorilla in the room, which is that a maxed out 16-inch M3 Max MacBook Pro costs an unconscionable amount of money. It is absolutely and unquestionably overpriced. Apple bluntly screws its high-end users on the price of RAM and SSD storage in particular because it, largely correctly, surmises that the sort of holy fool who will want or need the tippy-top spec of their computers is not a price-sensitive customer, either because they're having it paid for by their, probably tech, company, or because they just have the money and don't care that the computer costs the same as 2 to 4 months of rent, depending on where one lives. 8. What don't I love about this MacBook? Aside from the quibbles noted above, what I don't love about it is the macOS, which is, of course, pretty but feels clunky and backward to me, although I entirely admit that at least some of that is due to me spending the last decade primarily on Windows. Which is no treat. I admit it, but which at least I'm used to and understand. When I got the M3, I made the joke on Threads that I couldn't wait to put Windows on it and make it a proper computer. This was me trolling, but I would be lying if I said I didn't check out the Parallels emulation software to see if it was something I wanted. I decided against it, for now, mostly because the programs I'm used to in Windows that I'm also using on Mac work almost exactly the same, and that's where I'm spending most of my time anyway. But I reserve the right to change my mind. 9. Am I happy with my new M3 MacBook Pro? Aside from the fact that I wish it were much cheaper, absolutely. It's a fantastic computer and it's doing everything I want it to do today, and likely for a whole bunch of tomorrows. Would I recommend this computer to others? For people who need a whole lot of computing power, sure, although I would ask them to ask themselves how much RAM/storage/processing power they actually need, and then see if a cheaper version would suffice, because, again, the high-end price here is untenable for most folks. For everyone else who wants a MacBook, an Air is almost certainly the way to go. On the topic of upgrading, if you already have an M1 or M2 MacBook Pro, you almost certainly do not need to upgrade to an M3 at this point. All the tech nerd videos I've watched have the 3 Apple Silicon generations benchmarking pretty close to each other, close enough that for most people the difference between them in completing tasks is not going to matter. The M3, and particularly the M3 Max, is for MacBook owners upgrading from Intel Macs, or for people, like me, who are entering into, or back into, the Apple ecosystem. I'm buying at the high end here, so I don't need to be thinking about the M4S, M5S, M6S, or, probably, the M7S. I intend to wring every penny out of what I paid for this delightful, ridiculous computer.